Hi everyone, welcome to this lovely little panel that we call Millennial Watchmakers, and thank you very much to my panelists for joining the discussion. So let's dive straight into it because I think we're all dying to get a hold of the issues at hand. So first of all, I think we need to talk about really Millennial Watchmakers, this term. I think we all have quite different opinions of what constitutes a Millennial Watchmaker, and we have different perspectives on because of what we do, who we are, our backgrounds, and so on. What do you think constitutes the term Millennial Watchmaker?
A Millennium Watchmaker, it's a very good question, basically, because what is actually, I would even start before Millennium Watchmaker. What is a watchmaker today? So for me, a watchmaker today is actually a group of, to make a watch today in the industry, you need someone who has the idea, the concept of the watch. You need someone who is developing the construction, the engineer. And then you need actually persons who are able to machine the construction, the idea. And then you need a watch assembler who is able to assemble in the quality and in the functionality of a mechanical watch. So it's actually today, for me, it's split into 4, 5, even more categories or workers, professionals. For me, this is actually could be even a first talk, you know, a first question to all of us. What is a watchmaker actually? Jean-Marc.
Yes, I think Jean-Marc.
Thank you.
It'd be good to get Jean-Marc's take actually, yes, because you have personal experience. Your sons are what could be constituted in this generation of millennials.
Oh, a lot of things to speak about. Yes. First, what is a Millennium Watchmaker? I answer after to that. I think it's not easy because before, when we started in this profession, it was very clear. We knew how it worked, and it was easy to know what to learn and what we'll do with that after. Today, it's completely different. And I come to your question. Yes, what is a watchmaker today? And a watchmaker has to know much more things than at the time. At the time, we just had to know something very clear. You make a watch. A watch is made with some wheels, balls, and balance wheels, things like that. And if you were good to do that, you were a good watchmaker. I think today we need to know much more things. We have to be involved from the beginning to understand what the Millennium clients wants, and so it's a huge problem. And I don't want to speak too long, but we can come again.
We have very good insight from Jean-Marc, and we have Swiss-German precision from Felix. But maybe Alexis can give us a bit of a more holistic kind of insight from a design standpoint, perhaps.
Probably the least, by far the least expert in this panel in the watch industry. I'm more towards design education. So for me, I mean, from my perspective, watchmaking today is not about the movement, as it was maybe said. I think it's about, again, the whole watch. So that incorporates design. I mean, the previous panel spoke a bit about design, and I think that today what we could call watchmakers includes also design. And I think that's very important, knowing that the skills that are also requested and can go from technical skills to design skills. And more, I think the education also helps that. Technology does too. So I think it's a more, as you said, a more holistic approach on what watchmaking is today for the younger generation.
Because we had a little bit of a chat earlier, and you actually raised a very good point that maybe we should widen the categorization a bit and not just talk about watchmakers, but watch creators in a way. Because it's a creative process, and it's not just like sort of assembling watches and putting them together, because that's a very limiting way of talking about watchmaking. But watch creators could possibly be a more, Jean-Marc?
Yes, I could add also the design comes also inside the movement. Today we design also the movement. Before, movement was something that we used and we just add a dial, hands, and a case. And today we design the movement also. Movement is completely part of the watch, and so that's a new dimension that you have to really think about. So design is important.
We're very happy to have Mr. Klaus here with us today because we really feel that you have the most broad experience and like you have seen so many generations of watchmakers come and interacted with them, maybe even educated some of them. What do you think are the main differences of the different generations of watchmakers that you've experienced, shall we say?
It's a long time. 66 years I started to learn watchmaker this year, and so in this time, of course, a watchmaker was a watchmaker, nothing more. And so I started there, and I learned then more and more. And in our manufacture, IWC, since almost 50 years, we have our own watchmaker school, where young people come, and it's interesting when we get 4 or 5 young people to start to learn watchmaking, we have the choice in Schaffhausen. Yeah, many people during school, in the last year of school, they can come to IWC in our watchmaking school to try for a few days to see what is a watchmaker. And our teachers, they have a good eye and a good feeling which should be or could be a good watchmaker, which one not. And so we are really on a good way to get good watchmakers. And after the 4 years, it begins. Yeah, it starts. Of course, these young people are welcome to work in our manufacture as a watchmaker, and then will come the difference. A few of them, maybe there will be all the life a watchmaker to assemble movements. Some other would like to make a little bit more, and this have all help from us to go higher and higher to even to the watch engineering.
You were talking about interacting with students. Now, would you say that over the years, over these different generations, it's the same qualities that really mark a student out as being outstanding, someone who has potential? Maybe we can start with Kurt and then move this way now. When you interact with students, is it usually the same qualities over the years, 20 years ago as compared to now, that really, mark a student out as being someone exceptional?
I think when we want more and more people likes the mechanical high-end watches, and I think this should be start with the apprentices. To get the fascination of watchmaking, and then they can transmit it to all the friends, all to talk about with friends, with young people, what is the fascination of a mechanical watch.
Yes.
And with this, we hope to get more and more interests for the mechanical watches, for the real watchmaking.
For the rest of the panel, do you think it's more challenging now than it was before to really raise that kind of interest in young students nowadays? Because earlier we were talking about really, we want to pinpoint what separates millennial watchmakers from those of another generation, the qualities that set them apart. So would anyone like to respond? Felix?
Okay. For me, the base is the passion for watchmaking, as you told just before, Mr. Klaus. It's really the base. So I grew up in a family of watchmakers. My grandfather, IWC, he worked in IWC. My father had a workshop, and today he restores clocks. And this is how I grew up, in seeing all these clocks in parts and to understand the details of antique clocks. And this is the start of watchmaking somehow. So in our company, small company, 15 people, actually all the people who are involved to create our watches have a watchmaker base. The engineers have a watchmaker base, and the conceptor Martin Frey, my partner, actually he's a watch lover since his early age, but actually he is not a watchmaker. He's the only one who's not a watchmaker, but he loves watches. So he has the part of being free. Martin Frey, his name tells it. So for me, this is the thing actually. It has to start with watchmaking, with history, the culture. You have to understand the rules before going on. You don't even have to break them, as someone tells to us. But Millennium Watchmakers now. Millennium Watchmakers are the watchmakers who grew up with the digital possibilities. And this, for sure, is a good, you know, it gives you a lot of possibilities. It's a good machine, it's a good tool, but actually, basically, it starts in your head. As you said in the forum before, you have the idea and you need the inspiration in your head. So nothing is replacing your head. It just helps you. The millennium digital, I would call it the digital age, also in watchmaking. Actually, it is here, but it has to be relied to the base, to the culture, the history.
That's a very interesting dichotomy that you actually brought up, actually, the watchmaker who grew up as a digital native, you know, because you would assume that these two concepts, mechanical watchmaking and living in a digital age, they're quite contradictory in a sense. But maybe, Jean-Marc, you work with some quite young watchmakers at Agenhor. Maybe you can tell us about your personal experience with some of these digital natives who come to watchmaking.
I agree with what Kurt said and with you. So it's two things that are made, very well made. The watchmaking, like before, is very, very important. I think people always like very good material, very good watches, very well done by very skilled watchmakers, old-style watchmakers. But today we speak about millennials. And we speak about young people, my two sons working with me, and of course they see the world completely differently. That means everything is going much faster. Today you can produce imaging, and so that's the thing that you need more than ever. You have to imagine new products because people want always something new. You imagine new products, and you have to go from this idea to the final result very fast. And for that, you need very fresh neuronas. I think it's important, and the young people are really are the best to understand that, to understand the new machine, to understand the new way of producing watches. And so we can't speak about one category of watches. You have really many different things, and you have many different clients. I can see that the millennial buyers and watchmakers are on another planet than we were. And so it's not because it changed that the older has to disappear, but it's place for everybody. But we are at the very beginning of something that will be change our industry completely.
Of course, when you talk about the evolution of millennium watchmakers, you brought up a very strong point that the customer is also evolving at the same time. So maybe now, Alexis, you can share with us a bit of your experience about the evolution of the approach to design and function, and the approach that you have observed maybe since this is kind of your area.
Just to maybe add something and do the transition, I think that the young generation today is a lot more disruptive than the previous one, which is, I think, totally normal. And they don't need to have a father or a grandfather who was in watchmaking to continue this kind of tradition. I mean, we have had students which graduated from ECAL who had absolutely no link with the watch industry, not even watchmaking, a watch industry, nothing to do. They didn't come even from Switzerland, and now they have brands. I mean, we have an example with Fiona Kruger, who came to Switzerland from Scotland. You know, of course, very well the links of Scotland with watchmaking. I mean, it's 2 words apart almost. So she arrived, she did her diploma project, she designed a watch, and now she has a brand, which is the continuity of that watch. And she works, of course, with Swiss craftsmen and so on, but I think it's something which maybe was, if not impossible, very rare to have had in maybe 10 or 20 years ago. So I think that we should not underestimate this kind of new generation which pops out of, let's say, nowhere in a way, and brings a lot of knowledge, a lot of passion, and I think that you don't need to have this kind of, you don't need to have grown in the Vallée de Joux, far up in the mountains, to become not a watchmaker necessarily, but at least very, very interested and involved in today's watch world.
That's a very interesting point you brought up, that the current generation of people coming into the watch industry, they have a mindset of disruption. They don't necessarily conform to set conventions or history or how things are assumed to be done. So maybe if Kurt can kind of give us a take on that, because now you, as I mentioned before, you do have the longest experience and view of our industry. Is this something that our industry needs right now, this mentality and approach of disruption, of doing unexpected things, something quite new, mechanically speaking?
Yes, as I told, it starts with apprentices all. And what is today a watchmaker? Yeah, we have different watchmakers. Really, as we know from the last time, from before, a watchmaker is here to assemble watch or to repair watches. But in industry or here, when we talk about watchmakers, is someone design new products. And yeah, for this, in the industry, we have the engineers. But when I got retired, we needed new engineers. For me, the most important was someone want to study engineer should be before watchmaker. And the best with our engineers we have, for instance, all made a watchmaking school for 3 or 4 years, and after only they went to the engineer school. So for me, a watchmaker must be inside a watchmaker with the same fascination. Even he is really engineer with all diplomas. He must be in the basic a watchmaker to feel what means this, what is a watch, to have still the feeling in the fingertips. I have it with my age, really the feeling. And when we here made some watchmaking classes here for customers, as well, it is well, not only for fun, but to see something new. I always tell them, you will learn the feeling in the fingertips. And this is not only really in the fingertips, but overall.
In the past, like, in previous generations, a watch designer would be a watch designer and a watchmaker would be a watchmaker, and they would have completely separate responsibilities. But as we discussed, these two roles are starting to converge slightly. You always have to consider the other side. And Jean-Marc, we said just now during our earlier discussion over lunch that, there might be a slight change in how people are starting to view this, because they don't have so many traditional roots in the watchmaking industry now. like Alexis brought up, you know, people are starting to come into the industry without a watchmaking background in the family or without that tradition in the background. So what do you think about this, Jean-Marc?
That's for the main industry, the important industry today. We work with engineers. Engineers are very important. They do quality and they do process and things like that. But what is important is to make a watch which has a sense of a watch, and for that you need a watchmaker. But a watchmaker doesn't mean it's only something who assembles things very well. I think a watchmaker today can also be a creator, very creative, and he has to find some inspiration. And the inspiration comes from the clients mostly, comes from people you work with. And again, I have to say a word with Max, because I just learned a lot with him, because he allowed me at the time, or we discussed, and we started to make a watch from the design. We just had the possibility to put the hands on another place. We use a retrograde system and things like that. And after I've been very much influenced by the women, we had the chance, after learning during 15 years at the bench, after 15 years at the computer, after I come to have the direct contact with the clients, and after it makes a big change when I start to work for ladies, because that opens my eyes, saying it's possible to reimagine the watches, not only making always better perpetual calendar, better things like that, but make new function, make things starting not only by the design of the dial, but starting from a story, from something that happens with a discussion, in the discussion with the client. And I don't want to speak longer. But.
So very quickly, because I have a question for you, Felix, so don't relax too much. But on that note, Jean-Marc, I want to ask you specifically, generation from generation, how would you think that, for example, your approach as a more traditional generation differs from your son's approach, Laurent, who is, you know, really one of the younger ones? How would you say, your personal observation, how do they differ, your approach to watchmaking, to construction, to movement design?
I think they are very close to me. They learn a lot. They agree with this way of thinking. And you spoke about Fiona. We had also the chance to discuss with her, and that allows us to imagine a new movement. And that's my children. That's my two boys that are doing that, and they are doing that very well. So one is a technician, is a watchmaker. And the other one is more about the administration, things like that. That means that they work together, and that's very important. And they know that it's very important today to go faster and faster, to feel the client, to understand something new, and to go that millennium as also the clients, not only the watchmakers.
We left a bit previously our point that Alexis brought up about disruption in the industry and how this new generation of millennial watchmakers perhaps have more of an affinity towards this kind of disruptive approach. And I want to ask Felix, as kind of the original disruptor, who kind of one of the pioneers of the independent watch movement with the founding of Urwerk in, was it 93?
97 we started. 97 was our first Basel World exhibition. It's 20 years ago, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
How could I forget? Anyway, so, you know, as someone who really kind of pioneered this, do you think this is something that is good for us? Is it something that our industry really needs right now, this kind of, you know, not reluctance, but, you know, they don't feel like they're confined by traditions or conventions?
You know, okay, for me, at the time, 20 years ago, it was really a reflex which was quite natural. As a very young watchmaker, just graduated from school. For me, it was kind of difficult to see all these super masters and big companies, big names with super high complications. To enter in that, let's say, competition, or to be someone in that world, it seemed to me somehow impossible. The mountain was too high, or somewhere too old to climb for me. So we were looking for new values, for a new direction in watchmaking, and this is what we discussed and what we exchanged with Martin Frey, my cousin Christoph Träger, which is it's actually two of them are contemporary artists. They graduated in Lucerne, and they moved to New York. So we will rely in that direction. I love also architecture. I have a lot of architecture friends. So we brought in this vibration, and we were able to do that because another 10 years before, 97, 87, for example, more or less, was Frank Müller, who was the first one who printed his name on a dial on an expensive watch. Let's say, I don't give a bigger definition than that. So it became possible to have your own name on a watch. This was really, we were kind of in the beginning on that. And what we broke, we prepared, we continued that way what Frank Müller started into more liberty between a watchmaker. I come from a watchmaker family, Martin Frey, an artist, and we play ping pong. It's really an easy ping pong between Geneva and Zurich. Phone calls, emails, pictures, whatever, we exchange. And then we create on the base of that exchange, we go on and creating. And this is, I'm really super proud and happy to see today we are no more the only ones who interact like that. And I don't understand Urwerk as a company. Urwerk is really a research studio, a research atelier. With 150 watches per year, it's not a commercial brand. So, and this is, I think, quite important to give that input into the industry to open up somehow a new horizon. And it will never stop. It will continue, and it's very positive. And I really want to be positive about the new generation because they have all that information very quickly. All I ask them and I try to teach them is to focus on a certain moment, to focus on one idea and to really go for it and not to sweep too quick from one idea to the other. A certain moment, when you started Urwerk, you have to know that the first 7-8 years, it was a disaster actually. The people, they came all to Baselworld, they say it's beautiful what you do, it's amazing, it's absolutely unique. But then actually we didn't have any orders. It was just absolute mess, a commercial mess. It was impossible. And so we had to stick into our vision over 7-8 years to make it happen, to make it a reality actually, and to have to be lucky today to have some prizes and some recognitions. And actually we restarted that a few years ago when we added an artisanal electronical device into our mechanical watch. So this is another step. This is another and probably a challenge for the new watchmakers. I hope so. I try to open a bit that door. So I'm very optimistic.
So based on the point that Alexis brought up earlier, but actually this is going to be open to everyone, so feel free to respond. How do you think traditional watchmakers are failing to address the needs of millennial customers? Anyone?
Oh, thank you, Suzanne, for this very good question.
Come on, it's after lunch. We have to make things interesting. Let's go.
But I think we have to take it very positively. I think it's a new generation. We have to come in the subject today. We speak about millennials. Millennials, for me, have to change our world, because the old world will subsist for sure, because making very important watches, they're well done. But it's a small part of the market that makes dream everybody. But today we have to imagine how we'll go to the market and what the people want to buy. And I think we had the chance today to be able to produce very new product in a very close discussion with the designers and with the market. And we can do that also when we are very small. But we have to go back to stop a little bit all those verticalization that blocks everything. We have to trust again to the small people, because we can do a lot when we work together. And that's the way how I can imagine it's possible to go very, very fast. We have to go always faster to imagine new products, to interest new generation. They need a lot of different things. It changes always. This morning we heard about we have iconic watches, models, and probably they will subsist. We'll make round watches. We'll make the same watch for 40 or 50 years, making small change. But millennials probably want something else. And that we can do that because we are connected to the clients much more. We have new students that have no fear. There's no more taboo. I think today I work now with young students, and they have new ideas. And we, as a watchmaker, we have to imagine how to produce the movements and to sell it. And another very, very big problem with the Millennium is that at the same time we sell completely different. We have very huge difference between the normal way of selling and the people who sell nearly with losing money, selling directly through the e-commerce. So that changed a lot also in how we can think the new watches. So I don't know.
In fact, what you just mentioned about perhaps diversifying the ecology and the landscape of watchmaking, in a sense, that's something that we observe in how millennials approach consumerism. They want more diversity. They don't all want the same thing. So it almost kind of parallels the patterns that we see in how millennials consume and their buying habits. Felix, you wanted to add something?
No, I was just about the selling point of new ideas, of new, as I said, at Urwerk it took us years. And for sure, it has to be avant-garde in the beginning when you have to make an investment, and it's not immediately paid off in the industry, because the industry is quite slow in evolving. But you just have to do it, because this is what drives me at the end. So you have to continue. Your fabulous new movement chronograph from the center is an incredible development. It's a heavy investment, but you are not sure. Our investment we did 5 years ago with the EMC, it's just on a break even, let's say. We are selling like 15 watches per year. 15 watches is 10% of our production, okay. But it helps us to open up new doors, and I think it's very important that this, as I said, it's what drives me, myself.
Alexis, I'm going to drag you into this now. You've relaxed for far too long, I think, because we discussed a bit earlier about how the millennial customer base, their demands are changing, and the challenges of meeting these demands. So maybe you can share a bit your take on this.
I don't know about the commercial side, but I think that the millennials, they maybe, I think, also due to the size of the structures eventually, which they are in, can take more risks. And they can eventually not, go through market research and such before getting a project out. And also, usually, I think that the product cycles are shorter. Today, technology also brings all that, especially for small series, can make it also let's say, closer to from the moment you design a watch or you conceive it to the moment that it's out. And also, if you go away from more traditional ways of selling the watch, as online or things like that.
They're very relevant to e-commerce and online selling. Yeah.
And I think we're living in a moment which, everything is possible, definitely. It's up to each one to choose, the way they want to work. And we also see brands which, again, were not existing a few years ago, which pop up with Kickstarter funding and which have a huge success with a product which was not expected to get so much success. And then again, it's brands which are driven by young people which love watchmaking, they love watches, but of course, again, they don't have necessarily like a family link or a strong, let's say, historical culture. But I think that a lot, in any case, a lot goes through also education. I think that it would be eventually a good idea that for the specifically watchmaking schools to also bring in something else than just watchmaking. I mean, to open a bit the perspectives with culture, art, design, and to make that watchmakers keep their skills and make them even better by also at some point opening up to the world and to something, you know, which is around creativity in the broader sense.
I don't know if anyone on this panel has any experience with the watchmaking schools and the courses that they offer, and you know what you're suggesting essentially that they should be more broad rather than just being very specifically focused. Does anyone have any connections to any of the training facilities at the moment? Could comment on this? No? Maybe someone in the audience a bit later.
No, that's the problem with the school. That brings me to people who visit a watchmaking company. They all like very much the watchmakers. The problem is that how we work today to have a best quality. The industry no more use the true watchmakers because they can't work, because they has nothing to do. They just has to assemble properly, follow processes to have a very high quality, standard quality. But we don't need any more people coming from the school. That's awful to say. And it's why I hope that we can have a lot of small brands, because they can go to the market and propose very, very good watches made with watchmakers. And we have another trend that is normal watches that are good quality, that work, you don't need to service it, because it's the dream today. It's to avoid the service. And I think people need to have the contact with the watchmakers. And so we have to continue to make watchmakers, but after we need to use them, and we need to give them a work that is interesting. And I'm not sure that's about the subject from today, because the millennium probably wants to have cheaper things that you produce, that you can buy, that you can play with. You can, like your cell phone, maybe you keep it as long as it works, and after you buy a new one. Here, with my age, of course, I am completely involved in very, very high level watchmaking, but that means also that we have to reinvent new function, not only make it better, we have to reinvent, and that means we have the new contact with new clients.
That's quite interesting actually, and Kurt, I want to ask you maybe, at IWC, is it mostly, do you accept students from the watchmaking schools, or do you mostly train your young watchmakers in-house?
For us in IWC, it is a very good thing to have our own watchmaking class, as a watchmaker school. And so the apprentices, when they come, they know our products, and it's easier. Maybe they are a little bit on one way, not less general. They are trained for our products. But so I have now another thing. When I think back to my time as a young watchmaker, there was two classes. Here, one level, the watchmakers, and then up almost in the sky, the engineers. This is now changed. Yeah, today, when our team is designing some new movement, watchmakers from the production, from assembling department, are integrated into the development. They can have their opinions. What is, in the end, they have to assemble the product. And this is sometimes difficult. In my time, the engineer sometimes was never watchmaker, only the engineer school. And they thought, yeah, they constructed, and the watchmakers had to do. Now it is much more mixed. And young people after watchmaking school, anywhere, watchmaking school, or in IWC, it is much more integrated in the designing of new products. And for me, I think this is very, very important for the future. So, because these young people, watchmakers, are now no more watchmaker 60 years ago or in the new time. They are watchmaker to make watches. Really, from the name, watchmaker, not only sit here and assemble the wheels all together, but thinking much more. And this integration of our young watchmakers in the design is very important.
You said that obviously now this sort of integration of the two different levels of watchmaker that you talked about before, it's more important now and it's super important for the future. But maybe we can pinpoint the reason why it's important for the future, it's like essential, but maybe not so important in the past. Do you have a theory about this? And this is open to everyone.
Yeah.
Why was it less important then and more important now and even more important in the future to have this more integrated approach? Because I think that really sort of cuts to the heart.
I'm not sure, sorry, but what I see, it's the watches today are made by engineers essentially, and it's very close, maybe less at IWC, but we clearly see that today we speak about process, we speak about engineer, how we do a watch with new products, new things, and the watchmaker are not so much involved. So, I would like to agree with you, but I think it's a big separation today, and that makes a big problem. We can, if we speak about mechanical watches, we need to speak about normal watches that a watchmaker can really produce, think, and work with. And today it's no more like that, and it's something that makes a dichotomy now between what we think about the product and what it should be, and what we only hear about so wonderful work of a watchmaker, but I'm sorry to say, but the watchmaker does not much today in most of the watches, and it's why we have to make possible to have at least some small brands to keep this knowing, to keep that. You dream about the watchmaker from another time. I dream too, and it's important to give the possibility. And with the technical progress, as well with the electronic as with the machine, we can produce very, very good new products with skill, watchmaking skills, but watchmakers are very important. We should start from the watchmaker school and go to engineer school after, to have both together.
And design school.
Yes.
And design school.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that you're the best movement of the world if you don't not just package it, but think it from the start, and also see how it is, let's say, visible to the buyer. If you don't have an involvement of a designer, you can put it in the bin almost. So I think it's also very important that there is a full circle, which maybe was not the case previously, because the engineer was actually eventually taking the place of the designer, because the designers were not maybe as recognized, and I think that unfortunately for me there's still not enough, because I mean all the watches are designed, but by a magic trick nobody speaks about the designers, or in very, very few cases. It's like the brands come up with their watches like they fall from the sky, and I think that there should be more visibility to the designers in a way that it's recognized also as a profession, as it is in the case for furniture, for cars, for all the accessories around us.
I absolutely agree. Felix, you said you wanted to add something?
Yes, I gave a course, a workshop at the Head in Geneva lately. Actually, the goal was to redesign an Urwerk. And there were two possibilities. Actually, you could start on a scratch on a white paper to invent a new Urwerk, or to follow on an existing one. So that was the task we gave to like 7 young 20-year-old designers. Actually, it was 1 man and 7 or 6 women. And they worked during a month on the propositions to Urwerk. So it was really interesting to see, to follow up, to come closer to these people. Together with Yassine, we follow this course at the Head in Geneva. And okay, it came out very quickly that it was difficult to them to think about a new mechanism. At Urwerk, you always have the mechanic, the movement, and the case comes together. It's not only a new design case or a new movement, it's both together. So we were very quite limited. So we had to redefine and say, okay, we make an evolution of an existing movement. So it was not actually not easy to bring. And as we said before, you need a team today of people who are professionals, design, engineering, the watchmaker. But if you have too many people, the danger becomes that it's actually too many people, they give too much salt into the soup. So it becomes no more interesting or actually not good. It
becomes confused.
Yeah. So that's a big challenge today for the industry to organize this process. For small companies as Urwerk, when Martin Fry and myself, we can almost to 95% define a new piece. So it becomes very straight, very simple.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to open up the panel to audience questions. And here, I'm going to go slightly off piece because actually I want to ask someone in the audience a question, because I noticed that Stephen Forsey is with us. And Felix and I were talking earlier about, some of the stereotypes that, a lot of us have about millennials, that they, lack focus and perseverance and resilience and things like that. These are the ideas that all of us have about millennials and the new generation of people. But as we observed, the watchmakers in Urwerk and Forsey are actually relatively young. They're all like sort of in their 30s, or some of them even below. They're quite young. And we've noticed, of course, that these qualities that we ascribe to millennials are really not present in what we observe of millennial watchmakers. How would you care to address this, Stephen?
Thank you, Susan. I was doing my best to hide over here. No, very engaging discussion. Thank you, panel members. And as you said, well, actually, 25 years ago, I was a young watchmaker. Arrived in Switzerland from the UK, having done 5 years of watch restoration. So I'm not a millennial watchmaker as such, but part of a new generation like Felix, Jean-Marc, of course, Mr. Klaus, sort of helped to break the first stones. And I think as Mr. Klaus said, that it starts with apprenticeship, but maybe even earlier. And for millennial generation today, the difference is the connection. And I see it through our children. They are straight away very connected at a very young age, which has a lot of advantages, but we have to control that. So our way was to let them have the access to computer for 1 hour a day or something, but to do drawing, to read, to get a balance. And I don't think there's any reason why new generation cannot be interested, take up the passion of watchmaking, design, engineering, hand finishing, machining. It's all there, but it's a very, very long culture, and it's something I think which for us as humans is very deep in our culture. In our nature, we are about connecting the mind to the hand. And what differentiates us from the rest of the animal kingdom is our ability to then communicate and vehicle that. And watchmaking is a very unique platform for that. I think it's great. So, from our side, we find that we need at Urwerk Forsey, and I think for the others, we need to have a mixture of experience And then we need to have young people with passion and motivation, because we have to renew, we have to pass that knowledge on. It does not belong to me, it does not belong to anybody in particular, it belongs to the whole community. And so this is something we have to all struggle to do. And what's quite disturbing is it's often independent watchmakers like Felix who struggled because the internet perhaps was not at his disposal when he started. It took him several years to get some visibility, some recognition. But we have to struggle as independents to bring some focus to these profession behind. Jean-Marc has worked in the shadows for quite a long time, huh? I wonder. And very bravely, and finally companies start to open up and talk about the people behind the different, behind the creation, behind the product, and that side. So,
thank you for that. Okay, I see Ian has a question.
Hello, Ian Skellen, Quill and Pad. I'd like each of the panel members to propose a new watchmaker or new watch brand, not one that you've got a relationship with at the moment, that it either excites you or you think it's worth bringing to our attention. So I'd like at least one or two names off everybody, please.
It's maybe not like haute horlogerie in any sense, but there's a brand, a French brand called Baltic. Maybe some of you have heard of it, which raised money on Kickstarter. They had pledged for 65,000 euros to start the production, and they ended up with 600,000 euros. I think it's one of the many examples of how can you build up a brand from scratch and build it with the public's not just money but also interest in watches. Again, it's like a neo-vintage approach, but I mean, fair enough, why not? But I think it still watches, and I think that it shows that there is an interest for that.
So, okay, on my side, I would give a regard to Recense. Recense is an incredible, Benoit is an incredible creator and aesthete, designer. So he has really a new approach of designing a dial, and with an aesthetic which is really, for me, a millennium aesthetic from really today. So this is, on that side, really an interesting company or person, Benoit, and at Recense. And then you have Seiko. Seiko, a Japanese watchmaker. They actually work with all the possibilities they have since the 60s, 70s. They started to make research on Liga technique, but also on electronic. So they do not have this Swiss problem of, okay, we could destroy any history, culture, or I don't know what. They just do it because the technique is here, and they try to bring that technique in an interesting phase into their watches. So these are the two brands which I like.
It depends to when we start to look, but I could say young, Acrivia. He makes very old-fashioned, but with a lot of new function. Very well done by hand. Acrivia is very young, a little less young, but Max again, it's 12 years. I don't know. It's not much. Huh? So he really make a big revolution in what the appearance of watch with the 3D. It's crazy what this guy has done. And what can we say? And the brands I'm working with now. And again, with Fabergé, maybe it's a brand that is 3 years old, but what they have done alone, that shows also that it's possible today to produce the best product with very few people, with very few organizations. You make a thing because you have a young lady at the head of that. She works with a designer, things like that, and we produce something very new in an old way, the deep roots in watchmaking, but completely new invention. And this chronograph, it's possible to invent a chronograph. This brand is 1 year, or is 6 months old, and we completely reinvent something that nobody had the courage to touch since 150 years. So that means it's possible to do a lot of things with new brands can come, but maybe they won't sell. That's different. Another question.
I want to mention also that the brand you brought up at first, Acquivia, they are really an example of a brand that benefited very much from social media and the incredible amount of social visibility that it gave them very quickly. Whereas in the past, it would have taken them years really to get that level of recognition and appreciation.
Basically, Ian, I have to tell you, it was not a very nice question. I have very good friends here who are owners of some companies, and it was quite difficult to give judgment on that. So.
Anyone else? Maybe we have time for just one more, final one.
We've seen a few millennium companies fare well and others not so well. For instance, we have the example of BNF, but we also have the example of the Bethune, who struggled a little bit and is trying to come back. What is your opinion on that? Those were just 2 examples, but I think it's a good example.
Yeah. So for me, on that point, for companies from our new generation, from the last 20 years, let's say, the important thing is the long-term approach, and probably you can go on when the creator, in the beginning, the motor person is still the owner of the company. Somehow you get a security that it goes on. As soon as these startup companies get into shareholderships, it becomes complicated. It can go in any direction. It's uncontrollable anymore. It can go very high up, but very quick it can destroy. So it has really these young companies. They have really to prove to go up to a certain scale by their own force. This is more or less my temperature on that. They have to build it up to a stable size somehow. And for me, going as soon as you start to share, to sell it to shareholders, it becomes complicated. And probably the most of these companies now who are in trouble, they are no more owned by the founder of the company.
That's quite interesting, Felix, because I find that relates to what Alexis was bringing up just now about crowd-funded brands, because what you said about owners or founders kind of ceding control of their brand to someone else, whether it's a crowd-funded sort of approach or whether it's external investors. Do you agree with Felix that ceding creative control or directorial sort of control over the company can be bad for creative?
I mean, I don't know if it's bad, but I think that we should start getting used to the fact that some brands will have a limited lifespan. And then people who maybe started them will start another one. I think it's like this kind of serial startup movement eventually. And at the end, why not? I mean, maybe it's not a bad thing. I don't have any preconceived idea, but I think that the way the world goes now, I mean, it maybe will be the case in a couple of years. And really there will be a permanent evolution, and I think that we maybe better get prepared to that.
That is really interesting, but kind of difficult to reconcile with the idea of mechanical watchmaking being something that lasts for the ages.
I know, but it's part of the change.
Oh, well, I feel like we've started a whole new topic now. But
well, that just means that it's not enough to have a very good product. You need to have a very good business. You need not only have the best one, the best movement, the best case, the best watch. You need to be able to sell it, to find the clients, and that's another world that I don't know. But it's probably not because of the product that they have problem. It's because of how they came to the market.
Well, just to wrap up, because I think we're out of time, I think we can all agree that obviously with the new generation of watchmakers, including customers, there are a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of flexibility and agility in how people move nowadays, how they approach design, watchmaking, and also the business. And I think that, you know, no matter how you see it, I think there's still a tremendous amount of excitement and optimism about the future as it lies in the hands of Millennial Watchmakers. So please join me in thanking our panelists for their time, and also thank you to the audience for joining us today.